Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third Cleantech Conversations online in our online event series. Just waiting for everybody to jump online. I can see the numbers going up there. But while that's happening, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Tiffany Bauer and I am the Program Director for the National Cleantech Conference and Exhibition, which is taking place in Brisbane in March 2021. Today we are discussing how our cleantech innovators are preparing for the post-COVID-19 world. We have a fantastic lineup today of Australian cleantech innovators, and also along with those charged with leading technology innovation. So for the session as well, we've got representatives from a cross-section of sectors, which should make for great conversation today. I'm pleased to introduce our facilitator, Yasmin Grigaliunas, who is CEO and co-founder of the world's biggest garage sale. World's Biggest Garage Sale is a Brisbane-based organisation designing solutions to commercialise the circular economy through the activation of dormant goods. Yasmin has been doing some really inspiring work in the circular economy arena and is proof that we can make a positive impact on people's lives and the future of the planet through events and experiences. So Yasmin, I'd like to welcome you and shortly I will unshare the screen and introduce the panel. In fact, I might start doing that now. Okay, so we should have everybody live now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for the introduction. We're all very excited to be here today. Is everyone up on screen now? I can see everyone there.
Yeah, we've got everyone there. I'll just do a little bit quick bit of housekeeping as well before we start. So just to let everyone know that this session will be recorded and the recording will be uploaded and sent to all those registered post-event. We welcome your questions and these can be entered into the Q&A section by clicking on the icon at the bottom of your screen. We'll endeavour to answer all of these questions throughout the session. We'll also have a few live polls that will be coming up on screen throughout. I think we've got two. You'll have about 20 seconds to answer those and the results will be available immediately. So this session will run for approximately 45 minutes with a bit of extra time for Q&A. So without further ado, Yasmin, I'd like to hand over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'd like to kick off today, of course, to provide an acknowledgement of country. And today I'm actually borrowing it from our Chief Entrepreneur, who's one of our panellists. So in keeping with Queensland's commitment to reconciliation, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the Yurra and Turrbal people as the traditional owners and First Nations people on the land in which we gather today. I recognise that this land was taken and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging community leaders. I'd also like to extend respect to all First Nations people here today. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders were the first scientists, astronomers, geologists, ecologists, engineers, building their deep knowledge about the nature of the world in which we live in for thousands of generations. Here in Australia, scientists continue to build on this tradition of inquiry, curiosity, custodianship, adding to the rich and social and scientific knowledge of our country. We like to think that our Indigenous Australians created the circular economy. So it really does give me great pleasure today and a real buzz because I have the opportunity to facilitate a panel of absolute legends while we're sitting here virtually alongside these inspiring leaders. What I love about our diverse panel is that there's this binding common thread that flows through all of us. And this is your doers. We're the walkers, sometimes the runners, but those out there who for years and decades have been learning through action, failing fast, getting back up again and coming together to collaborate and connect all things clean tech. What I would like to say quickly before we've got a couple more people coming in, as I can see the numbers climbing as we go. Certainly from our perspective, the team at World's Biggest Garage Sale are really proud to be executing on Australia's first omni-channel circular economy precinct. That's a little bit about us. We're doing that right here in beautiful Brisbane, creating jobs and pathways for employment through clean tech and circular economies. These disadvantaged and vulnerable sectors of our community more than ever through repair, recycle, renew, remake, and I'm sure we're going to hear a whole myriad of other rewords today. All things re-commerce. This is really a sector where the doers come together, community collaborates, and we grow the sector as one. And that's really exciting. So what I'm going to do is very quickly hand you over to each of our amazing panelists. There's 4 of them. They're going to come in and give you a bit of an introduction on who they are, what they do, why they do it. And please get your pens and keyboards ready. Start typing your questions in, and we'll make sure that this is a really interactive panel for this session today. So welcome to our panelists. I'm just going to let you come on in at a time, speak over each other if you need to. Whoever gets in first can do the first intro.
I'll jump in. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Yaz. My name's Graham Ross. I'm the co-founder of Blocktex. We are a clean technology company that recovers polyester and cotton from textiles and clothing. Effectively, the clothing that we send to landfill is a valuable resource, and so we've got advanced technology that we've created in Australia that can recover them back to raw materials so they can be reused in many lifetimes.
Excellent. Thanks, Graham.
Hello, Greg McGarvey speaking. Just to put things in context, I'm a marine biologist. My business partner is an economist and a journalist, and we have a great project for Australia, which is an energy management planning solution that comes to Australia in the form of an electric vehicle or a range of electric vehicles. We're very confident in this. We have German and Taiwanese technology partners, and looking forward to today's conversation. The one good thing about this is that we have people globally that want to come back to Australia, ex-Australians, to help us make this happen. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Greg.
I'll jump in next. Thanks, Yaz. So my name is Will Suter, a director from Climate Kick Australia. So we're a not-for-profit focused on climate action through systems level innovation. We play the broker and backbone role in collaborations between industry and government and research, translating ideas and research into early action projects. So not just focused on efforts in technology, but also other levers of change. So finance, new business models, skills and knowledge transfer, building networks, and also policy as well. We're lucky enough to be connected to our sister organisation, Climate Kick Europe, which is the European Union's major initiative towards climate action through innovation. So we link to a global network. My background is in financial services and corporate strategy, but super proud to be working on one of the biggest challenges that faces the globe today. And now that I've got a young family, really important to me to be part of the solution, not just part of the problem.
Fantastic. Welcome, Will. So Leanne, if you can bring us up.
Hey, everyone. Leanne Kemp, Queensland's Chief Entrepreneur, Founder and CEO of Everledger, and the Global Chair for the World Economic Forum, Policy Advisor to the OECD for Circular Economy. So all things tech good, all things innovation and entrepreneurship, you know where to find me.
Fantastic. Welcome, team. So as you can see, for the audience out there, we have a really broad range of skills, capabilities and backgrounds here. So we're going to dive straight into it and look at some of the discussion points today. And I'm going to ask some questions, but we do encourage audience participation. So please do send your questions through. And while we're talking, while we're interacting, we'll keep this really free flowing. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. And I'd love for our panelists to dive in any order, whoever's most passionate, jump on in first. But post-COVID, now we're starting to come out into the recovery stage. I'd really love to know what sort of opportunities and challenges do you each think have actually come out of the pandemic from a clean tech innovators and producers perspective?
Well, from my point of view, Jasmine, the pandemic has actually helped focus on what we're trying to do. It hasn't stopped us because our business model is very similar to the Tesla business model. And I think our vehicle will be a solution that will be taken up for delivery of product post-COVID.
Fantastic. Interesting you say that, Greg. I'd love to hear from our other panelists on their thoughts about it being, better, worse, same. What have you seen?
I think it's really been interesting. I think from a human level, you're seeing a lot more conversations about people kind of noticing nature and the sky and being out with things. I think we've we've been locked out of being consumers. And so I think there's been a real interest in, well, what did I used to do? Well, did I need to go and buy this sort of stuff? How did I interact? I think there's been a lot of conversations both inside the family, but then also amongst friends. So I think from a personal level, it's been a really interesting journey. And I think as we start to progress back into normal life, I think people are really starting to analyze, do I need to be at work at 8 o'clock in the morning? Do I need to sit in my car for an hour and a half and emit noxious fuels when I actually work quite comfortably at home? So I think from a personal level, there's an adjustment in the way we look at how we are productive and how we kind of live our lives. I think from emerging technologies, clean technologies, which I think is really interesting. Clean technology often is talked about renewable energies, but the sector is really, really, really wide. And I think it's really emerging with the new technologies that will come into this space. And I think we're seeing is that we're starting to look at companies, how do they operate? How do they affect the planet we live in? How do they provide value back to us? And if they're providing value in the form of a consumer item, then what does that impact have? Because that impact, as a consumer, you wear that. And so I think we're starting to look at that, and clean technology companies provide a couple of real key benefits that traditional linear companies don't. Whilst we do create a product or a service, there is a byproduct or a value that's added because the product or service that is created often has a benefit back into society or back into the environment. And so you can still be a consumer and get your benefit from the environment at the same time. And I think that comes back to where we as human beings going through this pandemic, starting to think about, well, how do I exist on this world, on this planet, and what is my impact?
Yeah, I'm hearing a reflection theme there, Graham. We'll tap into that a bit, soon after a couple of these other questions. What about you, Will?
I've got a lot of thoughts about funding and innovation as the way that we should frame it moving forward. But in terms of immediate kind of high level thoughts for COVID, and then also the Australian bushfires as well, I think that there's value in, as a global society, kind of experience multiple shocks together and understanding kind of that we need to create that resilience going forward. It's good that we've kind of collaborated across sectors for a systemic response. So showing that, things aren't necessarily polarities, but you can kind of manage different priorities at the same time, health as well as the economy, which is very much central to kind of the transformation needed for climate action over the next 10 years. Hopefully as a society, it kind of brings us closer together as well. It's been good, to kind of hold up those people within our society, healthcare workers, teachers, to a higher pedestal as well, as rightly so. And then hopefully, seeing clearer skies kind of catalyzes change as well, seeing a cleaner environment, the type of world that we want to live in socially as well as environmentally as well, catalyzes and creates a little bit more support for climate action.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll ask Leanne to speak up. Leanne, I remember following you on Twitter during this pandemic, and you were sharing all sorts of images from countries where animals were taking over the streets because humans were locked away. What sort of trends have you seen around the pandemic and the opportunities for clean tech innovation?
So look, I'd like to be able to paint a perfect picture that the world actually took an opportunity to grasp clean tech as a part of the centre of COVID, but the reality is it's not. It became very fast a risk to humanity, and now it's an economic crisis. The reality is that we're working hard on a vaccine to help provide for a solution to the virus, but climate is the virus of our planet, and there is no vaccine. So I think that policymakers are reacting in terms of ensuring there's jobs secured for today. The economy can bring itself back, and we're all fast scrambling away from those unemployment lines. But the reality of that is we still have a huge virus across the planet, and that is not easily solved, and nor is it at the front minds of policymakers today.
I love it. Climate is the virus of our planet. I have no doubt that's going to end up on the tweet storm very soon. So in this post-pandemic era, do you feel that the clean tech industry need to rethink the strategies for advancing the uptake of climate mitigation solutions? Like, whose responsibility is this? Is it a sector-wide? Is it, where does the responsibility live?
Oh, I think it rests with some of our thought leaders, and very important that they underscore the benefits that can come out of the clean tech industry. Our industry, we'll have 350 jobs created by 2025 if we get a start this year. And on top of that, of course, all the skilled people reshoring to Australia. And we've got a globally clever team ready to go. But the noise coming out of Australia hasn't been constructive for our business. And it really just needs to be a change in the noise patterns and things will advance.
Do you feel the same, Will?
Yeah, I think there needs to be change. So I think we need to do it through the lens of the scale and the speed needed for transformation in the next 10 years. So, we need to achieve a scale and speed 6 times faster than anything the globe has achieved so far. And it's just not technology development that we're aiming for as a goal. It's kind of transformation of our society and our economy. And so, a technological roadmap won't get us to where we need to be when we need to be. So if you just take electric cars, and obviously Greg can talk in a little bit more detail, but the core technology being electric cars won't transform the system by itself. There are other underlying levers that need to be pushed and pulled to really get the transformation at the level that we need. So you need the infrastructure there, the charging stations, financial systems, insurance need to be reshaped, incentives in the markets need to be reshaped, policy and regulation need to support these types of changes. So I think a much more coordinated effort and an understanding and realization of kind of what creates that transformation and what needs to be connected together. So we all need to be moving in the same direction at the same time, and need support from government, industry and research to be able to do that.
Can I just quickly jump in there, Will? Charging stations are important, but they're not critical. In the UK, studies have been done over 80%, and if I really want to say the figure, 90% of charging is done at home. And the advantage with our vehicle is that you treat it like a mobile phone, take it home, charge it. And, too much focus on a need for charging stations sends the wrong signal out, because people think they can't own an EV if they don't have access to a charging station.
Yeah, accessibility is the message I'm hearing there, Greg. Nicely pointed out and picked up on the charging station topic there. Leanne and Graham, did you have any comments on that particular question around this post-pandemic era for clean tech as an industry?
No, I think, I echo what Leanne was saying. The policymakers who at times hold the purse strings have an opportunity to fund businesses that obviously meet the requirements of getting people back to work, gets onshores manufacturing here in this country. So we get access not only in the city areas, but into the regional areas. And look at those businesses that are commercially ready or need that little kick up to get going, as Greg was pointing, and we can start driving the economy from that point of view. So I guess we're not going to solve everything because we're kind of ingrained, but we also don't have to go back to business as usual. And so now this is an opportunity to kind of start to eke in these new technologies that have a better balance in the environment. And then what happens is the big end of town looks at those things, sees that they're successful, and they can be integrated back into those existing businesses. And we can make that change through that way. But without funding, innovation doesn't get to commercial scale, and that's a reality.
Look, I don't think it's going to come from government quickly. The reality is election cycles run in the numbers of years rather than decades, and this is a decade-long commitment to ensure that this change and new energy systems and renewable energies are put in place. There are consumers that, of course, can speak with their feet, but I don't think they're speaking fast enough and quick enough. The reality is I think that this will come from the finance market. And if you've got the announcement of BlackRock that takes really a position around what they're investing in, we've got Bank of Australia that's, of course, have come out even more recently in terms of their consumer-led credit card and giving a consciousness of the spend at a consumer end. Then I think it will come from peak body interest. So if you've got large corporates that can come together, if you think about the advanced manufacturing sector, there are only a handful of giants in the world that dominate the space. If you were able to put together a co-opetition, so they cooperate, but of course they compete. But a co-opetition environment, public and private coming together. Corporates say, we will lead out. And the financiers say, well, if you lead, we support. If you don't, then we won't give you the money, or the money is certainly a lot more expensive. And then government, of course, can put in all the policy enablement pieces rather than barriers. But it won't come from government. It's not going to come from it. And even if government did stimulate some incentivisation through innovation, then it's just too early. You know, a hydrogen strategy is at least a decade away. That's just too long to wait. You're not going to get scale within 10 years in hydrogen. Even though we've got these signed off agreements, and free trade agreements are coming in now thick and fast. You know, last night we saw the FTA signed between the UK and Australia. Great for Australia. Certainly pales into inexistence when you think about the Brexit and the European FTA that they walked away from. But ultimately, even these international sort of trade channeling, whilst you do have some, you know, government alignment into large-scale markets, without finance at the table, then it's gone. And, you know, finance with capital markets is really what moves innovation, not necessarily little grant programs and government putting in little incentives.
You're quite correct, Leanne, and we've discovered that. I mean, we're seeking finance offshore. And the reason I was talking about the noise that was coming out of government before is that it's very damaging when you're trying to raise funds offshore. You know, we had some questions asked by our German and Taiwanese partners after the federal election, when all the talk about, sort of negative talk that was going on about EVs. And we're just going to change the perspective, a positive perspective, but focused on Australia's future and looking at what is Australia's future. And electric vehicles can be one of the focuses, and it's from the perspective of an energy management solution to the country. And I was at Avery Lavin's talk this morning, and the biggest savings in energy are by bringing in energy saving technologies and building things better, putting things together better. And there's massive savings can be made. Office blocks can be reduced up to 90% in their energy footprint by doing it cleverly.
Yeah, some great conversations there, and some really interesting comments coming up on the threads as well. We've got our first poll up here asking you what best describes your current sector. I think we've got about 20 seconds or so to answer the poll. So if you can please participate in that right now, we'd love to see where you're from and understand a little bit more about our audience today. And while you do that poll, I'll just throw a quick comment here on the chat from Greg about the white noise coming from Canberra is the greatest soft barrier. It's dividing, not uniting. All it does is enable fear and results in no progress or decisions. So certainly ties into some of the comments there today. And look, I remember ourselves having one of the ministers come and take a tour of our warehouse recently. And it was actually an interesting comment he made. He said, Yaz, what I love about your organisation is you don't wait for government. And it's nothing offensive at all to government. Government works at a different pace and space to those of us in the startup, scale-up ecosystem. And I actually think it's the strength and agility. And Leanne, I love that you threw in the word co-opetition. We've got to get that trending, because if we can work together, collaborate together, we're not just trying to eat a big pie on our own like gluttons. Let's actually share a bigger piece of the pie, and we all get to share and enjoy more success together in building a better new economy. We have got a few questions here. I'm going to throw to one of these now. Does the new normal really have to look anything like the old normal? Now, there's a can of worms. The little poke from there was, could we do things differently, such as having clean, sustainable, well thought out manufacturing centres distributed evenly around each state of Australia? Leanne, I'm going to throw to you first, because I know you've travelled our state here in Queensland. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it already has changed. When we think about the size of the transition that has occurred just in the digital economy in its own right, 2 years of digital transformation had to occur in 2 months, and that was well said by the CEO of Microsoft. We've always seen an uptake in e-commerce as well, but those numbers now are ringing out. Nearly 30% of the world is now in e-commerce trade. We just saw a commitment here in Queensland with Amazon as a huge dispatch centre right here in Bruce Vegas. So I think that, a lot of this work is coming. What we're lagging behind is the skills currency. So how do we keep up with this pace of change, and how do we transition our skills at the same rate and pace of change that's occurring? I spoke just recently and wrote an article for the Chief Entrepreneur's Office about the economic recovery not taking a W or, an uptick return, but we're running on a third dimension, on a Z axis, which as we start to invest in that skills enablement piece in digital with infrastructure at a digital level, then you'll start to see the world rapidly change. We saw it in China. When we think about the payment system there, it's not sitting at a legacy. There's an entire parallel banking system that exists through conversational commerce, WeChat channels and QR codes, but we are held back by legacy. And the problem that I see is, as we start to think at the boffins in Canberra that make these great announcements about the industrial revolution, even 4AR technologies, the policies are still driven based on investment into old bricks and mortar, the old industrial economies. And yet there is no alignment in a total digital strategy. If we were thinking digital twins, right to repair, our ability to use the tyranny of distance as an economic advantage for us rather than a disadvantage, we'd be in a far better place. So I say extend the tenure, make these guys sit in their seats for a lot longer so that they have a consciousness about the decisions they're making have impact, not just in a 3-year or 5-year cycling, but it's going into the decades, and allow policy to live beyond tenure, which it doesn't necessarily. It's too easy for someone to walk in new and say what they did was all wrong. We have it in our world, in our software developers. I can't tell you how many times I employ a new software developer that tells me what the last bloke wrote isn't worth anything and he needs to rewrite the code. Well, no, not on my watch.
Yeah, I love it. It takes that complain and blame and shame, which is really a terrible way to live, right? We need to take a bit more of a positive approach to it. And like you said, beyond the tenure. Will, I'm going to ask you to comment because you've said it twice now. I don't know if our audience picked up on it. And just quickly, our audience today is made out of mostly innovators, made up of innovators, entrepreneurs and government. So we have quite a diverse group of people online today. But Will, twice you've mentioned technology development. I might have a slight little bias towards this because as a founder that walked into the startup ecosystem that's non-tech, mid-40s, completely different business model to usual. You've said it twice that it doesn't all have to be technology development. Talk to us, leading on from what Leanne said, around where you see clean tech and what your version of tech is in clean tech.
Yeah, so I think technology development is still a priority. So the development, the demonstration, the deployment of ready solutions, but that alone is not going to transform our society and our economy. So if the challenge was just technical, like if we were launching a spaceship, and inherently the challenge there is to develop the technology that'll get us, outside the atmosphere into the moon, then that is definitely the sole focus. But when you're trying to transform institutions and the structure of society and economy, then you've got to be focusing on other leverage points at the same time. So, Leanne's brought up in terms of the funding and investment. So we've got a $2.5 million gap in terms of investment over the next 10 years to undertake the SDGs and achieve the SDGs. And we are starting to see a lot more interest from the investment side, which is really good, but the traditional investment logic doesn't allow for capital to be deployed. We work with lots of kind of transformation projects, regional, kind of local level, and the individual projects or programs just aren't able to access private capital. So there's a big gap there. So we definitely need to reshape traditional investment thinking. And then we need to deploy other forms of capital like government grants and then also potentially philanthropic funding in smarter ways that kind of catalyzes and bridges that gap. So, you can deploy it potentially as a guarantee or as risk insurance to reduce the risk and increase the value for private investors to get it to the levels that they need. You can also play a little bit more of a coordination role to kind of link together these transition projects at a regional level, because case by case, they're not investable, they're not big enough, they don't make the right returns, they're too risky. But if you connect them up, so the IPCC, they said the three main strategies in terms of tackling climate change over that period, over the 10 years, one is climate mitigation, the other is climate resilience, which we both know, we all know well, and the other is reshaping financial flows. And then as other panelists have brought up, Leanne, the skills and knowledge transfer, reshaping policy. We've got a lot of kind of subsidies going in the opposite way to fossil fuels. And without them being removed, the system isn't allowed to transform. It isn't allowed to push and pull in the direction that we need it.
Yeah, really good point there. And I want to throw to Graham and Greg here, both running organisations, no doubt, with some capital journey experience. Let's continue that capital thread around, you know, are we now conserving capital, retooling capital, hanging on to survive? Where are you each at in your own organisations, both really, you know, navigating and innovating around clean tech as founders? Talk to us about your own capital experience pre and post-COVID.
Graham, I'll let you go first.
Sure, thanks, Greg. So where we are currently, we just pre-COVID, we were raising a Series A round to build our world first textile recycling facility in this country. Most of our conversations.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you just want to elaborate on your Series A for anyone in the audience today who is listening who might not know what Series A means?
Yeah, sure. Generally, the kind of the rule of thumb is you either fund it yourself through friends and family, which is the sort of the start, and we did that. And then when you need a little bit more capital to get to a sort of a proof of concept, you know, something that you can then take out into the marketplace. So it's kind of, you get a pre-seed or a seed round, and we raised a seed round here in this country, which gave us the runway to then spend time on our techno-economic plan of our facility. So we'd proven the chemistry in the laboratory, take it into a small pilot plant. We really needed to understand, could we build something that actually worked at a commercial scale? And so we used that funding to get us to that point, and that funding is still keeping the lights on, which is very thankful at this present moment. And then the Series A is when you're getting, so the sort of seed is around that sort of $1 million, top $1 million, maybe $1.5 million, depending on which industry. And then Series A is kind of on top of that. And so you're looking at sort of that sort of mid, you know, sort of 5 or 6, or maybe even up into the 10s, depending on where you're accessing that capital from. Those conversations were mainly overseas. Investing in hard technology solutions is really challenging to raise the funding in this country. For soft tech, the money is around, and we see lots of investment in that space. We were looking overseas, and obviously once the pandemic hit, everybody kind of shut the doors and said, we're not going to have any conversations from that. But what has been really interesting then, what has also transitioned is there's investors both overseas and domestically have kind of raised their heads and kind of gone, okay, well, this might be our opportunity to invest in something that is going to be in the future. And we've got an opportunity to kind of think about our investment strategies. And so I think the challenge we face in this country is there is money to get that seed round. Getting into that Series A is a little bit harder. Sort of that sub 10 million is a challenge. Over 10 million, there is money around. And you know, Leanne rightly mentions BlackRock. You know, they're a great leader in this space, but you know, they're not coming to invest in a company in Australia for, you know, less than $10 million. So there's a challenge, and I guess, and I think we'll hit on the right point. We need to look at different funding models, and they don't necessarily have to be a handout from the government, but if there's somewhere that we can cooperate with the financial markets and government policy to secure that funding, if, you know, obviously the numbers have to stack up. And so a company can then get the capital to get into commercial stage and then pay back that debt. There's, I believe public money is there for the public good. And if a company of mine could access that public money, and if the requirement was to pay that back over a period of time that we all agreed was available to the business, well, then that makes sense. You know, as long as the cash flow can scale. And prioritize that sort of stuff to these clean technology companies that have not only a service or product benefit, but also a benefit back to society and back to the environment. They're the kind of things, I think that's where government can kind of make the priorities. But then also the financial department, the financial industry needs to kind of think about, do they come to the party? And, you know, the conversations we're starting to have is about carbon credits and these sorts of things that as an early stage entrepreneur, you've got no idea. You're busy trying to develop your innovation. Getting that kind of knowledge in to say, well, I can access the capital because my product has carbon credit benefits. And what does that look like? And what are those schemes that we can bring in to make it accessible for us as early stage innovators to get access to and to understand? And then you start to have different conversations with the financial market, which is something that we're having at the moment.
And Greg, your extension on that, what's your experience been like?
Up and down. We had seed funding, 5 million available to us in 2018. They came out and did a due diligence in Australia and said, sorry, Greg, you've got great ownership rate in Australia. We like your strategy for your exports. But Australia, with you, a marine biologist, and your partner, an economist and a journalist, looks a bit risky. You're trying to start up a vehicle building industry. Well, it's not real. It's energy management with wheels and seats. And they said, look, the government's just let the auto industry go. We are not aware of any clear policy intentions in EV. And so they withdrew the money. But it doesn't matter. We've secured it. We're just waiting on the release of funds from a humanitarian fund. And we'll have clarity on that in the next month. But really the noise from government, as I said before, is the main obstacle. And I can see there's been clever things done. I was flown over to Qingdao to sign up for a German factory to go into the Qingdao Eco Park. What attracted them to do that, and which is what Australia should be looking at, they were given a plot of land worth about $1 million. They only had to pay $200,000 for it. So that suddenly gives them an equity position to borrow and build their factory. And down the track, everyone wins. There are a lot of different ways government can help, and it's really investing in our grandchildren if we do this. And we've got a vehicle here, doesn't steal their oxygen. It's made of green product. We've got research and development agreements with UQ and other universities. It is cheap to run, so it's got that pocketbook effect. It's $3.60 per 100 kilometres. You go to a petrol station and try and do something with your vehicle. And it's very clever in the fact that it can be built quickly and it can do model changes. And we've already got designers from around the world and here in Australia wanting to set up a team to design for a local. So I've done a bit of a sales pitch, I guess, but the point is this is a great opportunity for Australia when we've got the money from overseas. And it's a shame because Australia had 800 million sitting in what's called the Automotive Transformation Scheme. We couldn't qualify. It didn't matter what we did. We didn't qualify for it. And there's been similar schemes in Australia that we're precluded from. And so we haven't given up. We're stubborn. And if at the end of this this project will go. If it doesn't go in Australia, it'll be overseas. We've got plenty of people talking to us from overseas. But I've got 10 grandchildren here and I want to see it for them. So
awesome pitch there, Greg. I love that you took the floor and you've got your brand out there, and hopefully people are jumping onto your website so that they can see the amazing work that you are doing, aceelectricvehicles.com.au. Leanne, do you have any comments to that?
Look, just a couple of my comments. I think, BlackRock, Fidelity, they are making investments in Australia. They do make sizable checks, yes, beyond 10, but also less than that. I'm a standing example of it. Fidelity invested in Everledger. And of course, we have our main Brains Trust operation here. So don't shy away from those funds because they will engage. I think pre-COVID, you had to jump on a flight. So maybe you could actually jump on a digital Zoom link with them. We have the Northern Australian Innovation Fund, which is a big $1 billion fund. It looks at huge, heavy infrastructure investments. And that does look at funding vehicles not as in car vehicles, but funding vehicles in various different ways and the use of physical land. So we saw Q-Rider, which was a loan scheme that came up. It pales into a non-existence when we compare it to how the French and or even the UK government has supported clean tech innovation as well as post-COVID recovery, but still there are sort of small signs of government putting those sorts of vehicles forward. But it's very difficult to be able to apply, let alone win that government money, and that's the reality of the moment. So I'm not sure that I'm in a position of influence to influence that change. So we're all short on time, short on resources, and we just need to pick our most favourable bets. And sometimes that is not the government horse.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the questions that came in today from the Risk Store here says, how can we utilise social media more effectively? Storytelling, noted here is the best example from the Risk Store is the Fully Charged show. With the noise that this has created and the mind changes that it achieves are enormous. So the question is, where will our fully charged show come from?
Well, I think social media is really important. I mean, I've built ACE EV Group over the 4 years, basically on LinkedIn. We've picked up so many good people out of LinkedIn. You know, it's a what I call it the sensible social media. But you know, I got over 20,000 followers now, and that's just a great resource for us in tapping into some of the latest knowledge and technology and solutions to what we're doing.
I think what we have an opportunity in this industry, or this emerging industry, is to be real thought leadership, not only from the particular points of our businesses, but also from that wider perspective of why we're doing it. And so there's obviously, you've got your social media, but you've always got a chance to write a blog or contribute to a webinar and that sort of stuff, and put your voices out there, just to start to have those kind of conversations. One of the things that's been really important to us, and we started Blocktex, was we didn't want to align ourselves with a waste management company. We didn't want to align ourselves with the traditional thoughts of what recycling was, because we were believing we were starting the foundations of a future industry, one that doesn't exist in this country and certainly doesn't exist globally. And so looking at the perspective of giving ourselves a name of clean technology, which allowed us to bring in our advanced technology, the smarts that we've done to grow this, when in actual fact what we're doing was taking, you know, your most loved favorite shirt that was actually worn and stained and torn and had run out of its life, but it actually had value if we could bring it back. And so what we're trying to do is reframe those kind of conversations. So there is value in your waste, but we don't look at it as waste. We look at it as an opportunity, and it's actually a resource. So over and above the conversation we put in the marketplace, put really clear conversations about clean technology, resource recovery. They're really important. So we don't talk about waste. We don't talk about recycling, because I think those fundamental traditional business models are very linear. Those, you know, traditional companies make money by collecting it and then spend as little as possible to get rid of it. Whereas a company like Blocktex works on a circular economy. We actually make our money when we sell the product. So we actually have to collect it, process it, turn it into a product before we actually make any money. And so there's a motivation for us to recycle and reuse. And so I think over and above social media, it's how you describe your business and how you position yourself. So you can start to not tell people they're doing the right or wrong thing, but show them that there's another way to do things, and why the way you're going is something they might want to get involved in.
Yeah, Will, I think you'd have some comments on this. You've had firsthand experience seeing it from the ground up with organisations that have effectively been born and then shaped with ideas from your programs. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that works and why it's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of our collaborative projects and programs are to support early stage clean tech entrepreneurs. So to, you know, ideate, understand what problem owners like city governments and state governments are looking for in terms of problem spaces and solutions. And then to support them with free programs that kind of get them to the next stage, where potentially they can grow into sustainable businesses and be investment ready and also accelerator ready. So it's really inspiring to see people go on that journey. And I think that's an important kind of bridge to the social movement, or some of the conversations that happen online, because I think that's an incredibly important lever of change, is increasing awareness and interest. And there's lots of great groups that do good work in terms of advocacy, dispelling the myths, getting good messages out there. Like, I think at the moment, in terms of the stimulus, there are good organizations like Climate Works, Beyond Net Zero Emissions, that are kind of dispelling the myth that you can't couple growth with sustainable industries. So, you know, there's lots of case studies internationally where growth in renewables outweighs growth in fossil fuels, or kind of these traditional status quo industries. So it's good to get it out there. But the next step is actually demonstrating in our own context in Australia that things are possible. And people very much need to see things in action to start to believe. So it's coupled with action is that important social media message and movements.
Yeah, and action is certainly a key word in this economy. And look, I'd like to ask you, Leanne, speaking of social media, you are everywhere, both for the Chief Entrepreneur and also for Everledger. And I recently saw a great video around the COEX Circular Economy project that you enacted. So, can you share a little bit about that and how it was, really action oriented, and help the audience understand what a project like that would look like in action?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to comment on social media. I think if it's in social media, it's about as old and relevant as you'd read in the Courier Mail. So it's already happened. It's pretty much, the voice of many. It doesn't necessarily action change, and sometimes it doesn't even action well-written, versed words. Get on industry peak bodies is one thing. Secondly, ministers don't come up with ideas themselves. They're often driven by industry roundtables. Ministers have industry advisory groups. Seek those out. If you want to really be a policy maker for change or an advocate for change that has some influence around how policy is shaped, then that's the place to be. Ministers aren't watching Twitter and saying, great idea, we should run a policy. Oh yeah, there's a couple of people that are squeaky wheels and maybe we should put more grant programs in place. That's not how change occurs. So, that's kind of my thoughts on social media. It's always great to tweet and twat and share all those ideas in a social forum, but it doesn't actually enact change. It just creates more noise. Circular economy initiatives, of course. So someone just said it's very difficult for startups to get a hold of, I love it when people just come straight out with it. Very difficult to get on industry bodies that ask for memberships of 15,000. So not all industry bodies ask for $15,000 memberships. And in fact, to be able to participate at the World Economic Forum cost me nothing. For me to be able to be asked to join the Ministers' Roundtable is also not costing me anything at all. So Wolfgang, I would suggest reach out to my office. Let's understand a little bit more about what it is you're trying to seek, and let's get you on an industry body that doesn't actually cost you $15,000 in membership, because I wouldn't be paying for that either. There's other pathways to get ahead of the race. So yes, share my details. Let's get a meeting with Wolfgang and give him a hand. From the circular economy perspective with COEX, of course, which is the container exchange system here, it collects that waste. Aluminium, plastic, everything from cardboard right the way through to even polystyrene. But what do we do with that waste after it's collected? There are various streams that can be repurposed, rebundled, even flaked down, and new products can be built. So we were curious about that and began the project quietly in the background over the last 12 months, and have proven out a traceability system that traces waste, Queensland waste, to remake those plastics into food-grade plastics. And it's all in place. It was pretty easy. In fact, there was nothing standing in our way except for a whole bunch of people who said no. And we said, well, if not me, then who? So let's do it. And we did it.
Thanks, Leanne. Can I jump in there? I concur with Wolfgang. We've been in this business for 4 years. We have talked with every level of government, and surprise, surprise, they haven't asked us for a detailed financial model or business model. We've got one, and it's overseas with other people who've worked their way through it and said, this looks good, we'll help fund it. It's an attitude problem, really is. And there are different associations out there that could help us, but as Wolfgang identified, they cost money, and we're in a position where we haven't got money. In fact, I've done every dollar of my money to get us to this stage. And
well, fair enough. There's a difference between hearing and listening, and maybe some people aren't listening. So I take on board what you said, and I'm going to engage directly with Wolfgang now. And I know you've already tapped me on the shoulder. So I don't know that government's going to ask you for a financial model. That's really not what they're there. Government's not there to invest in your business. Government that is there to bring, a safe and structural environment for citizens to live and thrive. So they're probably not going to ask you for an investment memorandum.
I'm not arguing with that, but most governments are risk averse, and they want to know that if they're going to support someone, even if it's just putting out statements or whatever else, that they're legitimate and they've got a product and a project and a vision for the future that will actually work. I mean, there are plenty of dreamers out there, and we don't think we're in that category.
Yeah, some robust conversations, and I love it. That's one of the greatest things about bringing a diverse group of people together at all different stages of their enterprise. One of the questions we've also had come up, and I'm aware we've got about 10 minutes to go, so if we can help Glenn understand. He says that they've had many foreign countries and regional representatives reaching out to them and in order to entice how their Sunnovate PVT technology, I hope I pronounced that right for you there, Glenn, in their own regions and cities. But what they haven't received is one approach from state or federal agencies interested. So again, is the message don't wait for government? He asks, why aren't our Australian agencies more progressive in retaining innovation when it's easier to find an external launchpad? What are your thoughts? Is this theme a common thing? I mean, for me, I can tell you from my perspective, government moves way too slow for us. I love them, and there's a point in time where we do work together and collaborate. But I don't know, do we wait?
I just came off a call only about an hour ago, said all we need from government is a fast yes. A fast no. Tell us no fast. Don't just keep us hanging and waiting. And if it's yes, maybe, yes, talk to this person, give us a no and give it that fast. Secondly, I think innovation, Queensland has the smart state. It was embossed on beautiful number plates for quite some time. But the reality is innovation doesn't sit in the centre of any of the policy documents, and nor is it threaded horizontally. And we are still, feeling the cold winds that run through the hallways of the ghost of Malcolm Turnbull. So we haven't necessarily had a very strong policy position or actually a leader that could stand up in innovation. There's not, too many Silicon Valley-like icons that we can point to here in this country. So if we cannot see it, how can we be it? And that's also another part of the problem. A lot of innovators, when they get to a certain stage in business, leave and go overseas because the addressable market in Australia, we're a very small population. We enjoy a quality of life, a huge prosperity backbone, but are we a huge addressable market? No. Are we a good niche market to try out and to innovate? Yes. So, there's a time and a place for us to leverage the strengths of the nation. But the reality is any business that's going to grow into $1 billion entity is not going to be wholly housed in one country.
No, so true. And look, I think we've got our next poll coming up as we start to wrap up with the final few questions. So as that poll comes up, please do participate. It's fantastic for us to understand the audience. The question is, what is the biggest challenge facing clean tech right now? There's six responses there for you. Please do respond and we'll capture that data and you'll get a little report back over the next couple of days through the social channels. Look, as we start to take on the last couple of questions, we've talked about government, we've talked about finance, we've talked about industry, we've talked about lots of challenges. I want to hear something positive. Like, talk to me about the good stuff. Let's throw out from each of our panelists, what is great right now for clean tech?
I'll jump in real quick, sorry. The great thing about clean tech is the number of people in Australia and the huge talent pool we've got here that's just waiting to get on board. That's the main thing. And the other great thing is we've got a reservation list for our vehicles and people can order them. We're going to have 100 vehicles available next year. And the interest there is great. And I mean, we've got a solution that's low cost, clean, and it's good for people, it's good for the country.
Excellent. Will?
I would agree. We have some amazing innovators. Glenn is part of our alumni for our Climate Launchpad program, and I know they're ranked by the World Energy Council as one of the leading startups globally. So yeah, we have amazing human capital here in Australia, great ideas. So that's the positive, but it is sad to kind of see those innovations go offshore and be supported. Even the frameworks for kind of acceleration funding from governments, you need to have international pathways. So they recognize the gap that is here within the ecosystem. We really need to work to fix that up.
And Graham, what about you? What's something that you're noticing, seeing and experiencing that's really uplifting, fantastic and awesome in clean tech right now?
I think that we're having a lot of conversations here in Australia, but also like Greg internationally, and I think we're recognised. And echoing what Leanne said, Australia's a great place to develop your innovation before you take it overseas. You can certainly fly under the radar, and we've been doing that with our technology. We're equally a lot of conversation in regards to collaboration. So, part of the conversation is you might be supplying a product to a buyer, but they're bringing in their supply chain and their partners into that. So not only getting the benefit out of the product they're buying, but also there's a lot of information sharing that's going on. And I think circular economy allows us to enter in at different stages. And so you can share not only the knowledge, but also the value that's there. And I think what I think is also exciting, like I mentioned before, we're starting to talk about carbon credits. We're starting to talk about these thoughts about where there's other value outside of just that single product. So then other funding bodies or other vehicles can come in, whether it's government or private, can come in and get that benefit out of that product being created. And so I think that's where we've got to start to maybe hopefully start to accelerate value back into the environment. Still create the product, but create the products that have that secondary and third value. And that's where I think there's a lot of smarts and opportunities for this country to get involved in.
Fantastic. And Leanne, can you finish us off with some words of wisdom around the great things happening for you that you're witnessing in clean tech right now?
Look, I'd say we're moving to, particularly post-COVID at the moment, over the course of the next 2 years, this sort of sovereign-based supply chain. So this nationalisation, reshoring of manufacturing, the closing of our physical borders internationally, the fact that, China itself closed its borders to waste, but it also appointed a federal minister for circular economy. Now, when you hear that in one sentence, you recognise and realise that there's economic value in that appointment. You don't appoint a federal minister for circular economy unless there's a business reason as to why. There's jobs associated with it, there's economic value. And we do have an opportunity here across Queensland and Australia to recognise that every single citizen and or community and or regional town centre has an ability to bring together a circular supply chain of waste to value. And if our borders are closed and there's nowhere for it to go, then we need to come up with more innovative ways.
Yeah, I love it. What I've picked up from today, and as we wrap up this incredible panel, so much knowledge, so many notes. I don't know. Luckily, I had my mute on because my fingers have been doing some serious typing. Climate is the virus of our planet. We started off with that quote, and I will definitely be retweeting that over the next couple of weeks, Leanne. We're going to obviously attribute it to you. But if it's to be, it's up to me was a really strong theme that I heard from each of our panelists today. The doers, not the dreamers, those out there not waiting for the yes, get a fast no and continue to get things done, or GSD as we like to say in the startup ecosystem. Co-opetition, boom for that word. Go and pick up the phone and talk to people out there in the industry. Strangers can become friends and friends will then become potential partners. Get on industry peak bodies, hit up Leanne, she's put the call out there. And really for me, I also felt this trend around not just thought leadership, but action leadership ultimately. We like to call it GSD for the SDGs at our team at the world's biggest garage sale. And I will finish off with a little cheeky shout out to my amazing team who are out there on the ground doing the doing. If you yourself want an SDG badge, jump onto the world's biggest garage sale website. We're shipping them internationally and nationally now. Wear it with pride, and it's like a little beacon of light for those of us out there who want to go and get stuff done. I'd like to thank our panelists. They are legendary. Hit them up on LinkedIn. They are all very approachable. They do incredible work. Graham Ross, the co-founder of Blocktex, an amazing leader for circular economy. Greg McGarvey, Managing Director of Ace Electric Vehicles Group. Jump onto his website right now and get in line because those cars will be sold out. Will Suter, Director of Climate Kick Australia, one of the most amazing thought leaders who does bring action for new entrepreneurs and those who are looking to explore opportunities. And of course, Leanne Kemp, our Queensland Chief Entrepreneur. She's in her second term, the first time it's ever been done. And at the same time, she manages to be the CEO and continue to be the founder of Everledger, building two incredible enterprises with action leadership at forefront of everything she does. So I'd like to thank everybody today, and of course the team at NCTCE. They do amazing work, and please do follow their website. We'll make sure that we share the information with everybody in attendance today. It has been recorded, and for those who missed out, and if you're watching now, the recorded version, we thank you for watching, and thank everybody for being here. Well done, team.
Thanks, everyone. Hey, can I move around now?
Thanks to everyone, and thanks, Yasmin. It was a fantastic wrap up. I also just wanted to quickly say that part of our role as the organisers of NCTCE is to help with creating that voice for the industry, knowledge sharing and advocacy, and we're always here to help connect people. We're open to your ideas and suggestions for any way we can help. So please remember that. Thanks once again. Just want to let everyone know our next webinar will take place on the 2nd of July, and it will explore how to raise capital and secure investment for clean tech innovation in today's market, very relevant after today's conversation. So this session will bring together a panel of investment heavy hitters from Providence Asset Group, the Table Club, NERA, University of New South Wales and Societe Generale. So thank you once again for watching Cleantech Conversations.